What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel in another video. Today we are going to be going over the ultimate steering modification guide for your Jeep JK. I've gone through a couple different setups on the JK as far as steering goes, tie rods, drag links, steering stabilizer, everything steering. So going to be going over all of it today, what I recommend, what you should consider, and all in all, my recommendations when it comes to steering upgrades and what brands are the best ones to go with. So let's go ahead and jump right into it, guys. All right, guys, so first thing we're going to start with here today is the tie rod. So what should you consider when you're thinking about upgrading your tie rod? The first thing that comes to mind for me when I'm thinking of upgrading a tie rod is steel versus aluminum. So aluminum has only been around for probably about 4 or 5 years now for steering. Generally, it was always just steel. Nobody really thought about aluminum until people started using it for rock crawling. So with the aluminum, what's really nice about the aluminum and why I recommend it is the fact that it can bend right back to place after you bash it on a rock or hit something hard or anything along those lines. And if you want to see the test in action, look up the JK Gearing Gadgets bend test. He has a Barnes 4-wheel drive aluminum tie rod on his Jeep, or had on his Jeep, and he did a full bend test with a jack and everything, and it goes right back to form. So it's a great option if you're going to be doing a lot of off-roading, or if you plan on doing rock crawling at all. I would highly recommend the aluminum versus the steel. Now, the only instance where I would recommend a steel tie rod is if you don't plan on doing a lot of off-roading. So if you're going to be on road most of the time or just doing like very easy trails, then steel will work great for you. It's a little bit cheaper, so that's a great option to go for if you're looking on a little bit of a budget. But if you're going to be doing rock crawling, again, highly recommend the aluminum, so it'll bend right back to place, and you're not spending hundreds of dollars on tie rods every other trip you make. So definitely something to consider. All right, guys, another big thing to consider when you're upgrading your steering is going to be tie rod ends versus heim joints. What should you go with? What's best? And that really depends on what you're doing with your Jeep. So if you're doing a lot of off-roading, high speed, stuff like that, definitely going to recommend going with a heim joint because it's a little bit stronger than a tie rod end is. But if you're a weekend warrior like I am, you're just going, a few times a month or maybe a few times a year, nothing wrong with tie rod ends. So let me explain a little bit as to why. All right, guys, so this is my setup here. I'm running the Rock Crawler aluminum tie rod here. Now, this is a very beefy tie rod. It's 1 3/4 inch thick, or not thick, but just big. So that's the size of this one. Now, you can go a lot of different sizes when it comes to the tie rod. And again, if you're doing off-roading, I would recommend going with the biggest one you can get. But looking at the tie rod ends versus the heim joints here. So I've had tie rod ends on here before. This specific setup is the heim joint. Now, what's nice about this heim joint with the Rock Crawler kit is that it comes with a bushing here. So one of the main complaints about the steering being with heim joints, of course, is vibrations as well as maintenance. So they are going to require a little bit more maintenance. You need to keep up on the greasing of these. Otherwise, they're not going to ride right. You're going to have vibrations, things like that. But that rubber bushing definitely helps with the vibrations with heim joints. A clip here as well regarding my old setup with the Barnes 4-wheel drive tie rod. It had tie rod ends on it, which are basically like a ball joint style almost, and they rode great for a long time. However, mine did go out pretty quick. It could be a lot of factors that come into that, but mine went out fairly quickly, so I switched over to this setup, and I've been extremely happy. But if you're going to do tie rod ends, I would go with 1 ton or higher. There are a lot of setups out there that you do not have to drill the knuckle for, so I would recommend going with those just because it's easier. You don't have to drill through your knuckles. You don't have to worry about all that. If something breaks, you can just replace it with something from AutoZone. So definitely something to consider when you're upgrading your steering is the ease of changing things out if they do break. But again, guys, the Rock Crawler tie rod, I have absolutely loved it. I've been so happy with this setup. There's no vibrations on the road. It's very strong. The bolts and the nuts have not came loose at all. I've double checked them after every trip. It's been phenomenal so far. So I'm very happy with the Rock Crawler setup with these heim joint ends on them. All right, guys, and when it comes to tie rods, you have so many options out there. There's so many companies making good setups. But the top three that I would recommend when I'm looking at a tie rod, or what I would buy if I had to do this all over again, I would go with either the rock crawler setup. They have a new setup that's aluminum as well that looks super strong. So definitely check out rock crawler. You have RPM Steering, who also make a fantastic setup, and they're a great company as well. Same thing with rock crawler, of course. And the third one I would recommend would be Yeti Steer Smarts. They make great products, made in the USA, just like the other brands. So definitely something to consider, but those are my top three brands that I would look at if I had to do this all over again. All right, guys, let's move on to the drag link. Now, the drag link is going to be pretty much the same as the tie rod. You have to look at steel versus aluminum, and if you're going to be doing an aluminum tie rod, you might as well just buy the setup and get the aluminum drag link as well. However, that is not what I did in this case. So let me show you my setup and what I'm running currently, because it did just change recently. All right, guys, so what I'm running here is the Yeti Steer Smarts top mount, no drill drag link here. So what's really nice about this one is it has the Griffin attenuator on here. Now this is something I just recently tried out. I had the drag link flip without that. One of the ends went bad and I just decided to upgrade it. And I went with the Griffin attenuator, which is supposed to reduce some on-road vibrations, as well as just make the steering a little bit more smooth as far as over bumps, things like that. And I gotta tell you, so far, been very happy with it. It definitely has reduced some of the on-road vibrations, as well as some of the, you get a little shimmy over a bump every now and then, if it's a huge bump, and that does help with that. So I've been very happy with this setup. The Griffin attenuator has been a nice addition to the steering, and it was only like, I think $100 more, maybe $50 more. So I would definitely try it out. If you're thinking about upgrading, it's a great route to go. But the biggest question when you're upgrading your drag link is to flip or not to flip. So why would you want to do a drag link flip? Now, if you are over 3 inches of lift, I would highly recommend doing a drag link flip. And the reason why is because your geometry is going to be off, which is going to cause you to have some bumps there. And the more lift you have, the worse it gets if you do not flip that drag link. So what options are out there? Of course, you could go with one that has the huge ball joints at the end where you have to drill your knuckle out, which is a great option, something, to consider for sure, especially if you're going to be keeping that setup for a while. Now, what I really love is the Yeti no drill option. So let me show you that one again here. What I really love about this setup here is, of course, I did not have to drill anything, so it makes it much easier. If I need to replace this or anything like that, it's just going to make things easier down the road. But I've been extremely happy with this. Like I said, I had this set up as well for about 20,000 miles. I did have an end go bad, but that's not going to happen all the time. So I've been very happy with this setup. These are super strong, even with the no drill, even being a little bit smaller on the stud there. I've had no issues, been very happy with this setup, the way it rides on the road, and how easy it was to install onto the Jeep. Now, what would I recommend for the drag link? And I'm going to recommend that you do the same thing as the tie rod. Go with either the rock crawler setup, which is fantastic, the RPM steering setup, or you can also go with the Yeti Steer Smarts like I did. So you have options out there. Some you have to drill, some you don't. Something to consider. Definitely do your research on that, because if you don't like to do drilling, if you don't like to do any of that, definitely would go with the no drill, obviously, because when you drill this, it's a ginormous drill bit. It takes a while to get through that metal. So it's going to take a while for you to drill through that, but it is going to be a little bit stronger than the no drill option. So just something to keep in mind when you're upgrading these parts here. I would stick with the same brand. In this case, I didn't, because both of mine went out at different times. But I would stick with the same brand. It's probably going to save you some money if you do a package deal. All right, guys, and next we have the track bar. And this one is huge. You want to make sure you do not make a mistake with this upgrade. You want something that's going to be super strong, especially if you're running bigger tires, because the track bar is one of the main culprits of death wobble. Of course, there's multiple factors, but in my experience, the track bar has been 9 times out of 10 the reason why I've had death wobble. So let's go ahead and take a look at my setup, what I'm running, and what I would recommend for the track bar. All right, guys, what I'm running for my track bar here is the Rock Crawler track bar. I think it's called the bomb-proof track bar. But what's really nice about this setup is it's got the Heim joint here. So this is super strong, I've had no vibrations, anything like that, but you have a really strong heim joint on this side, and then on the other side, right up there, you have a bushing. So it keeps the vibrations down. It gives you one bushing side, one heim joint side, and I've ran this setup on a couple different Jeeps. And I will tell you right now, this is the ideal setup for a track bar, having a heim joint on one end, and also having the bushing on the other end. Let me explain a little bit why that's been so nice for me and on my setups. So on my two-door, I ran the same track bar, the Wrangler track bar. It lasted well over 30,000 miles with no issues. I never had to retighten anything, and it ran extremely smooth down the road, just like this one does. So if you're gonna go with an upgrade, I would recommend the Wrangler because I've had such great luck with it. I have ran the Yeti Steer Smarts track bar in the past, the huge beefy one, and that was fantastic. But for me, it only lasted about 10 to 12,000 miles. I think I may have had a defect on mine, and Yeti did send me new bushings. So been a great company to work with, but I decided just to upgrade versus replacing the bushings. But the bushings did wear out fairly quickly. I had a lot of play in them, and I had to upgrade after about 10,000 miles. But like I said, really strong track bar, great company. I would recommend either Yeti or Wrangler, but the Wrangler setup has been bomb-proof for me. So definitely what I would recommend if you're thinking about upgrading there. All right, guys, and last we have the steering stabilizer. Now, huge misconception about the steering stabilizer is it cures death wobble. Probably the biggest Jeep myth out there that has been debunked multiple times. Steering stabilizers will not cure death wobble. They are never the cause for death wobble. All they can do is mask it. Now, if you're going to replace a steering stabilizer while you have death wobble, your steering stabilizer is going to wear out a lot faster. So definitely do not replace the steering stabilizer if you have death wobble. That'd be my first tip. But guys, there are a lot of options for the steering stabilizer, and it does play a huge factor in your steering. You could run without it. I've ran without one for well over a few months and was just fine, but it helps the ride to be a lot smoother, helps the steering to be a lot smoother. I enjoy having one on. So what I went with here was the Fox steering stabilizer. Comes in right over $100. It's a great quality option for a steering stabilizer, and I would definitely recommend it. But again, a lot of options out there. If you like adjustability, you can go with a few other brands. If you like the adjustability, if you like being able to go from a firm ride to a soft ride with your steering stabilizer, you have the Fox ATS option, which has a lot of adjustability. Again, that's gonna be pretty pricey. You're looking probably about 400 bucks, 500 bucks for that. But it's a great option. And you also have the Falcon steering stabilizer that's adjustable too. Another great option. I would probably have that right now if they had the option for the tie rod size that I have, but they do not offer it right now. So I thought about upgrading to the Fox ATS eventually, but I've been so happy with the regular Fox steering stabilizer that I have not upgraded to that yet. And another big advantage of the Fox ATS and the Falcon is that they have the through shaft design. So they have the steering stabilizer, of course, but they have a shaft on each end. So it's going to be a through shaft design. And what's nice about that is you're not going to have resistance pushing you to one side, whereas with a regular steering stabilizer, of course you will. So with a through shaft design, there's no push to either side. With this steering stabilizer, I haven't noticed any push, but again, something to consider if you're thinking about going with a through shaft design. It is a better design. It's probably going to be a lot smoother on the road with no push or pull to each side. But again, you're looking at a whole nother price bracket there. You're looking around 400, 500 bucks for that. And again, with the steering stabilizer, lots of options. You could go with the Hydro Assist. Again, that's a much prettier penny. You're looking at about $3,000 for that whole setup with the steering box, the pump, the lines, all of it. But again, that's going to be more if you're looking towards 37s and 40-inch tires, because regular steering stabilizer is going to be just fine for 35s, even 37s. I'm running 37s. I have no issues at all with this steering stabilizer and off-road. But of course, Hydro Assist would be nice, give me a little bit more control on the rocks, so something to consider as well. And the last thing I recommend with the steering stabilizer is move that thing up. Don't have it down here like it is from stock. Move that thing up as far as you can, because you're going to bash the crap out of that thing. I've ruined multiple steering stabilizers before I relocated it up towards the track bar. So just something to consider. First thing I would do is get that thing up and out of the way from where it is from stock. All right, guys, and that's going to do it for my guide here. All in all, one thing I would highly recommend is go with the aluminum steering if you're going to be off-roading. It's just a much better setup. It's going to save you money. You're not going to be bending tie rods all the time. I would go with aluminum. That'd be my first recommendation all in all. But steering is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Steering is going to depend on what you're doing with your Jeep, what you're looking for as far as strength goes, and if you're going to be off-roading. If you're going to be off-roading, again, the aluminum is going to be a great option for you. But again, with steering, guys, do your research. There's so many videos, so many reviews out there. Make sure you do your research on steering before you buy some, because each setup is going to be different, and also the feel is going to be different with each setup. So do your research, watch some videos. It's definitely going to help out. I hope this guide helps you out as well. That's going to do it for today's video, guys. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions regarding steering, drop them down below. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have. Again, please like and subscribe for more Jeep and off-road content that is coming your way. And if you have any suggestions for a video, drop them down below, guys. I'd be glad to make videos with what you guys are looking for. Just drop them down below, subscribe, and then I'll see you guys in the next one.